The film opens in a dim room where a man is seen sleeping in a cryo-chamber. He is wearing a unique cover which empowers him to inhale and drink food in his rest. The camera then pans to a screen kept in the room, and it amazingly uncovers that the anonymous man has been in hibernation for 17 years, 2 months, and 22 hours. Out of nowhere, the gadget encounters a power disappointment, and the cryo-chamber gradually starts to open. Glimmering lights and blasting alarms likewise occupy the room, driving the man to stir. After nearly 20 years of rest, the primary thing he does is empty his bladder. I mean, remove his veil, and we at last get a legitimate perspective on the man's face. He appears to be in his mid-50s, which is obvious by the way that he scarcely has any hair. As the alarms keep blasting, the man hacks for some time and then rests up against the wall. After so long of rest, his body appears to have turned into a bit firm. Yet the man doesn't get a lot of opportunity to rest. The screen cautions him to clear right away, so he rapidly checks around the room and accumulates as many supplies as he can. The man likewise wears an exceptional suit and snatches a rifle prior to wandering outside. In the wake of escaping the dugout, he ascends as far as possible up and finally arrives at the surface. Yet, to his shock, he finds a world tremendously not the same as the one he knew quite a while back. The wonderful city, which was once rambling with life and vegetation, has now become crushed and unrecoverable. Not so much as a solitary residing being should be visible somewhere out there, demonstrating that an atomic strike has occurred here. As though that isn't enough, it is pouring constantly. The radioactive downpour has eroded of all that it interacts with, making the city look totally black and white. This horrid, terrifying, and feeble world is the new reality now. The man is left in sheer shock subsequent to seeing this, yet he must choose the option to push forward as it's just a brief time before his provisions run out. He trusts that there are individuals actually making do in this unforgiving no man's land. In the wake of collecting himself, the man checks his gadget, which uncovers that the climate is excessively harmful to inhale. He has a restricted oxygen supply, so he must act quickly. All of a sudden, he gets a notice on his gadget requesting that he head towards a rendezvous point. The distance is an astounding 10.4 kilometers, which might require hours to reach in this climate. Yet, the man doesn't have a subsequent choice, so he continues towards it. Following this, we are offered a few elevated shots of the city, and it seems to be out and end times. The garbage of structures, vehicles, and even planes are dispersed to a great extent. We likewise see shoot pits on the ground and papers with the titles of battle. Sooner or later, strolling, the man arrives at a neglected army installation. A few vehicles are lying outside in an unsteady state, yet nothing valuable is within them. The man then leisurely enters the structure with his rifle at the ready. He is desperate to see another human, yet he is likewise careful that individuals can transform into beasts in this present circumstance. The man goes room to room to check, yet all he runs over is flotsam and jetsam and junk. At one point, he at long last figures out how to track down something valuable, a landline, but sadly, it doesn't have a functioning connection. This makes his heart sink, and he laments briefly. Yet, he soon gathers his course and forges ahead with his process. Subsequent to escaping the structure, the man checks his gadget just to discover that it has no transmission. His already troublesome excursion has now become unthinkable as he doesn't know where to go. He again checks the nearby vehicles, expecting to find something helpful, yet without any result. The man then carelessly strolls in random directions for a really long time. He turns out to be so disheartened that he intends to discharge his main flare gun up high, yet without a second to spare, he rethinks. The downpour has likewise deteriorated, and the man's expectations of endurance are gradually decreasing. Yet, right when he's at his absolute bottom, his gadget blares. The man checks it and finds the notice: climate safe. This leaves him in a serious dilemma. For 17 long years, the gadget had been lethargic inside the shelter, and he doesn't know whether it's giving precise readings. But the man likewise realizes that his oxygen supply will run out, so it is a gamble that he needs to take. He calls his mental fortitude and removes his defensive cap. To his pleasure, the downpour doesn't influence him, demonstrating that the climate here is indeed protected. The man can hardly believe he is finally breathing regular air and feeling the water on his face. He takes a decent while to celebrate the moment, as he most likely knows he may not experience this again, Or perhaps this is everything he'll ever encounter. In the midst of the cheerful moment, the gadget signals again. This time, it guarantees that a colleague is close by. The man is stunned as it demonstrates the distance to be just 105 meters. Filled with recharged trust and assurance, he accumulates his stuff and hurries to the set area. The man has now started longing for rejoining with another human after nearly 20 years. Imagine a scenario where it's a woman. Tragically, when he shows up at the spot, all he can find is a corroded cap that had a place with the colleague. It is clear that the individual passed on quite a while ago. Adjacent, the man finds a radio which was producing the transmissions to him. Crushed and grief-stricken, he stores into tears and starts reviling as loud as possible. Whenever he's done, he gives the departed colleague an appropriate interment. He likewise drones a couple of petitions, demonstrating that the humanity inside him is well and genuinely alive. Following this, the man returns his cap on and forges ahead with his excursion. Since he doesn't know the specific course to the rendezvous point, he chooses to take a diversion. Following a couple of hours, he shows up at a desolated neighborhood which once housed numerous families. The man goes into one of the houses where he goes over a room loaded up with photograph photos. As he notices them, he becomes deep and starts crying again. God, it is uncovered that the house had a place with, in all honesty, him. An image of the man with his better half and their dearest canine helps him to remember the euphoric moments they had previously. Yet, he can merely fantasize about those moments now as the world he knew no longer exists. Okay, he gets a pass for crying there. After the man escapes the house, he frantically argues for help on his radio. He hopes that somebody will hear him and find him. He keeps searching for a really long time, and during this, we are shown more aerial footage of the city. The high-rises and different landmarks have been reduced to rubble, and everything looks monochrome. Soon after, the man enters a passage where he comes across a few banners. They all discuss war and killing, and Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, which turns out to have triggered the end of the world. The man notices them for some time before forging ahead with his way. When hunger sets in, he takes out a jar of dog food and starts eating it. This is the ultimate luxury he can get right now. Such is the condition of the world. Yet the food soon runs out, and with that, his chances of survival become slimmer. Despite this dreary circumstance, the man makes an effort to convince himself that he needs to look presentable and clean. He whips out his extremely sharp steel and starts shaving his facial hair, even though he doesn't have a beard. The man uses a broken piece of glass to observe himself as he is fascinated by this action. The battery of his gadget unexpectedly runs out. Now, he is left totally alone with practically no food, water, or radio transmission. This breaks the man's will to live, and he begins wailing while embracing the gadget. Not even 20 years of cryosleep can prevent dependence on technology. In the following scene, he somehow manages to get up and scales the tallest structure in the district. Now, he has only one thing that can assist him: his flare gun. The man is still hopeful that there is a living human in the city, but he doesn't know where. So he chooses to signal for help through the sky. He then fires his flare high into the air and apprehensively waits for a reaction. A few moments pass, and there is utter silence in the area. This devastates the man, and he likely cries. He prepares to leave, but suddenly someone answers him by shooting back a flare gun. Thrilled by the sight, the man rushes down the structure and heads towards the direction from which the flare was fired. The rain has also stopped, which makes visibility clearer for him. Suddenly, he spots a cap in the distance, which likely belongs to the individual. However, our hero doesn't look very excited, as the cap has the enemy symbol on it. This implies that the individual will most likely be hostile and might not hesitate to kill and steal supplies. Nevertheless, the man decides to take the risk, as he has been lonely for a very long time. He draws out his rifle and slowly approaches the cap. Just as he is about to reach it, a weapon cocks behind him. When the man turns around, he is stunned to find a woman pointing a rifle at him. They gaze at each other for some time, but soon lower their weapons, as it is futile to fight any longer. Neither of them utters a single word, but they understand everything. This is a sweet moment, yet we all know what is likely to follow.